Trapped in a Beach Villa Part 3. Chapter 14. The Run-In. The city glittered differently that night. Downtown Los Angeles had been transformed, its usual sharp edges softened into a dream of luxury. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom pulsed with golden light, crystal chandeliers throwing rainbows across champagne flutes. Velvet-draped tables groaned under towers of macarons and oysters on ice, while violins hummed from the corner, their notes blending with the low thrum of laughter and the clinking of crystal. Isabel had promised herself she wouldn't come. She'd RSVP'd no, then changed her mind, then spent an entire afternoon staring at her reflection before pulling on the only gown she owned that felt appropriate, emerald silk, bias cut, the kind that skimmed without clinging. A dress that whispered elegance but hid just enough, the faint swell she thought only she could see, but which haunted her every time she caught her profile in the mirror. "Breathe," she muttered to herself in the taxi, her fingers tight around the clasp of her clutch. "No one's looking at you." Inside the ballroom, it was easy to pretend. Everyone was looking at everyone else, models on the arms of producers, tech billionaires with their diamond-dripping wives, starlets practicing smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Isabel slipped into the current of glittering bodies, accepted a glass of champagne from a tray, and tried to remind herself how to act normal. For almost an hour, it worked. She laughed with Mia, who had dragged her onto the dance floor. She nodded politely when an acquaintance from work complimented her dress. She even managed a genuine smile at the string quartet's rendition of a pop song. And then, she saw him. It was as if the air itself shifted. Adrian Rivera stood at the far side of the room, half turned toward a cluster of donors. He was taller than most of the men around him, his posture unmistakable, straight, grounded, a man who commanded space simply by existing in it. The tuxedo fit him like it had been tailored in the dark by someone who knew every line of his body. His hair was combed back neatly, though a few strands had fallen forward, softening the severe set of his jaw. He didn't smile. He never smiled. But the golden light gilded his cheekbones, his throat, the sharp glint of his watch. He looked every inch what he was, older, colder, infinitely untouchable. Isabel's stomach twisted. Her fingers clenched around the stem of her champagne glass. She couldn't breathe. "He's here. He's here." Her first instinct was flight, to turn, to vanish into the crowd, to slip into a waiting cab and pretend she had never seen him. She even took a step back. But the press of the ballroom hemmed her in, laughter and silk and perfume hemming her on every side. And then, as if pulled by some invisible thread, Adrian's gaze shifted. Their eyes met across the glittering crowd. The noise of the gala fell away. The violins, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it muted into a distant hum. All she could hear was the rush of blood in her ears. His expression didn't change. But something in his gaze sharpened, fixed, held her as though she were the only person in the room. Isabel's breath hitched. Her fingers trembled so violently she nearly spilled her drink. Mia leaned toward her, whispering, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Isabel couldn't answer. Because it wasn't a ghost. It was worse. It was Adrian Rivera. The man she had kissed. The man who had left her. The man whose child she now carried, hidden beneath emerald silk. And he was walking toward her. Chapter 15. The Confrontation. The gala blurred. Isabel barely remembered the polite laughter, the clink of glasses, the way Mia tugged her toward a new circle of acquaintances. She only knew one thing: Adrian's gaze was still on her. Always on her. When she turned her head, there he was. When she tried to look away, her eyes betrayed her, snapping back to him. He didn't force his way through the crowd, didn't make a scene. He just moved with quiet inevitability, the ballroom parting around him as if it sensed who he was. By the time he reached her, Isabel's champagne glass was empty. She hadn't realized she'd drained it. Isabel. His voice slid low, steady, meant only for her. Her chest tightened. Adrian. The sound of his name on her lips made her pulse quicken. Before she could gather her excuses, he gestured with the faintest tilt of his head toward the open French doors. Beyond them, a balcony overlooked the city, its iron railing traced with ivy, lanterns glowing gold in the night. The music followed faintly out into the air. She should have said no. She should have claimed a headache, feigned another conversation. But her feet betrayed her, following him out into the cool night air. The balcony was quieter, the hum of traffic below a softer kind of music. The city glittered in endless lights. From here, the ballroom's roar dulled into background noise. Isabel gripped her clutch tighter. You didn't have to drag me out here. You didn't give me a choice. He stood close enough that she could smell the faint spice of his cologne, see the city lights caught in the planes of his cheekbones. His eyes burned with a kind of focus that made her want to step back, and made her unable to. You're avoiding me. Her breath caught. I'm not. You are. His voice was too calm. Too certain. You've been avoiding me since the second you saw me. She turned, resting her elbows on the cold railing, staring out at the glittering city. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass of the French doors behind them. Maybe I have good reason. Silence. The kind that pressed, heavy, leaving no escape. Her fingers trembled against the iron railing. Unconsciously, her other hand slid to her stomach, a protective gesture she hadn't realized she'd made until she felt the warmth of her palm resting there. And that was the moment Adrian saw. His gaze flicked downward, sharp and unyielding. She felt it like heat against her skin. When her eyes met his again, his expression had changed. No longer cool. No longer unreadable. There was something in it now, shock, realization, anger restrained so tightly it trembled beneath the surface. He stepped closer. Too close. The lantern light threw half his face into shadow, his voice a blade wrapped in velvet. Tell me. The words landed between them like a strike of thunder, low but impossible to ignore. Her throat tightened. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The city stretched endlessly beneath them, 1,000 glittering witnesses, but all Isabel could feel was the weight of his gaze, the inevitability of the truth pressing against her ribs. She wanted to deny it. To laugh. To walk away. But her hand didn't move from her stomach. And Adrian already knew. Chapter 16 The Revelation. The balcony was so still, it felt like the rest of the world had stopped breathing. Somewhere behind them, the gala carried on, music swelling, crystal glasses chiming, laughter rising and falling like waves. But out here, under the low glow of lanterns and the cold glint of 1,000 city lights, it was just Isabel and Adrian. And a truth she couldn't hold in any longer. Her hand was still resting protectively over her stomach, a gesture too revealing to take back now. Adrian's eyes were locked on it, on her, with the kind of silence that carried more weight than words ever could. He didn't ask again. He didn't have to. The question, tell me, still hung in the air, unanswered. But he knew. She could see it in the way his body had stilled, The way his jaw clenched, the way his expression, usually so cool and unreadable, flickered with something unfamiliar. She swallowed, hard. Her voice felt like it had to climb out of her throat, scraping against every layer of fear on the way up. I'm pregnant. The words left her mouth so softly they barely reached her own ears. Adrian didn't move. He didn't flinch. Didn't breathe. Isabel stared straight ahead at the glittering skyline, as if the answer was written in the high-rises or the blinking headlights far below. Her eyes burned, but she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of him. I found out a few weeks after I got back, she said, barely more than a whisper. I took a test. Then another. Then 3 more because I couldn't believe it. Still, no response. Her heart hammered louder. I didn't tell anyone. Not even MIA. Not my family. No one. She forced herself to turn toward him then, lifting her gaze to meet his. His face was carved from stone, no anger, no shock, no sympathy. Just stillness. But there was something behind his eyes. Something tight. I didn't know what to say, she said. I didn't even know if I should tell you. You left, Adrian. You didn't even say goodbye. That broke the silence. I left because you pushed me out, he said, low and sharp, voice barely controlled. You looked me in the face and told me not to stand there judging you. So I didn't. Her breath caught. So that's it. I hurt your pride and you vanished. He didn't blink. This isn't about pride. Then what is it about? Adrian's jaw tightened, and then, finally, he spoke. You should have told me the second you knew. The words hit her like a slap. Not shouted, not cruel, but heavy. Heavy with disappointment. Heavy with something she couldn't name. She stepped back. You think this has been easy? Carrying this by myself, wondering what the hell I'm supposed to do. I'm not some schemer looking for a payout. I didn't tell you because I wasn't even sure if you wanted to know. I always needed to know. Her chest cracked. Well, now you do. They stared at each other. The wind picked up across the balcony, lifting a curl from her shoulder, making the lanterns sway. A few strands of her hair caught in her mouth. She didn't move to brush them away. Adrian said nothing more. He looked at her, truly looked, at her hand still braced over her stomach, at the glassy sheen in her eyes, at the flush of heartbreak crawling up her neck. But he didn't step closer. He didn't reach for her. He just stood there. Unmoving. And that, somehow, hurt more than anything. Isabel turned before she could say something she'd regret. Her heels clicked against the tile as she walked away, back through the French doors and into the dazzling chaos of the ballroom. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Chapter 17 The Offer. It rained the next morning. Not a storm. Not the violent, operatic kind like in Cancún. This was quieter, a steady grey drizzle over Los Angeles, painting the windows with long streaks and dulling the world to monochrome. Isabel sat cross-legged on the edge of her couch, wearing a soft, oversized sweatshirt that no longer fit quite the way it used to. Her hands cradled a lukewarm mug of tea she hadn't sipped in 15 minutes. She hadn't slept. The night before played on a loop in her mind, the golden light of the gala, the balcony, the silence after she said the words, "I'm pregnant," the way Adrian had looked at her and not reached for her. She wasn't sure what she had expected, anger, shock, a plea to talk it through. Anything but the stillness. That had hurt most of all. So when the knock came at the door, not sharp, not loud, just a firm rhythm, she froze. A beat. Then another. She set the mug down, palms sweaty, pulse ticking too fast. She padded barefoot to the door, pressed one eye to the peephole. It was him. Adrian. Dark suit, no tie, collar slightly damp from the rain. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders rigid, eyes fixed on the door like he could will it open. For a second, she considered not answering. But only for a second. She unlocked it slowly, inch by inch, and opened it just wide enough for him to see her. Adrian didn't speak immediately. He took her in, the sweatshirt, the tired eyes, the bare feet, with a flicker of something that looked too much like concern. She beat him to it. I really don't have the energy to do this again. I'm not here to argue. His voice was lower than usual. Measured. She hesitated. Then opened the door fully. Then why are you here? He stepped inside. The warmth of her apartment closed around him, rich with the faint smell of lavender and laundry detergent. It was the kind of space that looked lived in, throw blankets, a half-read book on the arm of the sofa, a pair of ballet flats kicked off by the door. Adrian stood near the bookshelf, tension wrapped around his frame like armor. He looked like a man completely out of place, too expensive, too composed. But his eyes were soft. And focused only on her. You're not doing this alone. The words landed in the air between them, firm, unshakable. Not a question. A statement. Isabel let out a dry, breathless laugh. You don't get to show up here and... I'm serious. She stared at him, trying to gauge what game he was playing. Since when do you get to decide what I do or don't do? I'm not deciding anything, he said quietly. I'm showing up. You didn't give me the chance before. She crossed her arms tightly, holding her elbows like she was holding herself together. And if I had, she asked. What then? You would have called a lawyer. Sent a check. Scheduled it into your calendar between board meetings. His jaw tensed, but he didn't rise to it. No, he said simply. I would have come here sooner. Her throat tightened. She hated that part of her wanted to believe him. That part of her did believe him. You said it yourself, she said softly. I didn't tell you. I know. His voice dipped lower. And I understand why. You were scared. You thought I'd walk away. She didn't respond. Because he wasn't wrong. Adrian took a slow step closer. Not pushing, not closing the distance too fast, just enough. I'm not going anywhere, Isabel. She looked up at him. Her eyes burned. Her voice cracked. You don't get to allow anything. This is my life. My body. My decision. You don't get to control how this goes, just because you showed up now. I know, he said again. And for the first time, she heard the shift in him, the surrender, the realization that he couldn't fix this by force or logic. He nodded, once. You're right. She stared at him, searching for the coldness she remembered, the chill that had followed him like a shadow. But it wasn't there. Not tonight. Only something steadier. Heavier. I'm not here to control anything, he said. But I am here. And I'm staying. The tears welled before she could stop them. She turned away quickly, wiping at her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. I don't want to need you. He didn't answer that. He didn't say, I want you to, or you don't have to. He simply stepped forward and placed something on her entryway table. It was a small white envelope. Plain. His name written in the corner. She didn't open it. Not yet. When she looked up again, he was already at the door. He paused there, just once, hand on the knob. You don't have to believe me tonight, he said. But you will. Then he left. And for the first time since Cancún, Isabel realized she was no longer carrying this secret alone. Chapter 18 Pressure from the Past. The photo hit the internet before noon. Grainy, angled slightly from below, taken by someone hiding behind a parked car. But it was unmistakably Adrian Rivera stepping out of Isabel's apartment building. His face mostly turned, coat slung over one arm, that signature steel expression doing nothing to hide who he was. Billionaire Rivera spotted leaving unknown woman's home, baby on board. Is Adrian Rivera going to be a dad? Mystery woman identified, Isabel Moreno, former girlfriend of Adrian's brother. By 2 p.m., her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. By 3, she'd turned it off. By 5, he showed up. Not Adrian. Daniel. She hadn't seen him since before Cancún. Not in person. Only his name on her screen. The breakup had been clean, if not kind, ghosted messages, a slow fade into silence. He'd made himself scarce. Until now. The knock on the door was firm, impatient. Isabel opened it, and froze. There he was. Daniel Rivera. In designer sunglasses and a tailored jacket, freshly cut hair, and the same easy smirk that had once charmed her straight into disaster. Only now, it didn't work. Not even a little. She didn't move. Didn't step back to let him in. What are you doing here? He took the sunglasses off slowly. The charm was there, fake polished, surface deep. You're pregnant. Her chest tightened. That's none of your business. He leaned one hand against the doorframe. Actually, it kind of is. I think we both know that. Her eyebrows shot up. Excuse me. I saw the articles. The photos. He nodded toward the envelope Adrian had left behind days earlier, still unopened, still untouched. And you didn't think to call me. Isabel laughed, once, sharp. We broke up. You stopped answering my texts. You ghosted me, Daniel. He shrugged like it was ancient history. Okay, sure. But that doesn't mean you get to cut me out of something this big. Before she could respond, a new presence appeared in the hallway. Adrian. Standing there, silent. His coat still in hand, as if he'd just stepped off the elevator and walked directly into the eye of a storm. His gaze moved slowly from Isabel to Daniel. Problem. Daniel's shoulders squared automatically, but there was a flicker, the smallest one, of caution in his posture. The brothers weren't close, that much had always been clear. But there was history there. Competition. Resentment. And something even uglier beneath it. Daniel smirked, arms folding. Just having a little chat. Looks like I'm going to be an uncle. Adrian's expression didn't change. But the air around him shifted, cooled, sharpened. No, Daniel. You're not. A pause. Isabel stood perfectly still. Daniel's smile faltered, just slightly. You don't get to decide that. Adrian stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Not threatening, just sure. You had your chance, he said, voice low. Controlled. Deadly quiet. You lost it. The silence that followed was dense enough to choke on. Daniel's jaw tightened. You think she's safer with you? Yes. Adrian didn't even blink. Because I'm still here. Daniel looked at Isabel. For once, there was no smirk. Only bitterness. So this is real. Isabel didn't speak for a long time. Her heart was pounding, her hands clenched at her sides. But finally, without breaking eye contact, she nodded. Yes. It's real. And that was it. Daniel stepped back. Not defeated, exactly, but dismissed. He shoved his sunglasses back on and turned toward the elevator, jaw clenched. Adrian didn't watch him leave. He was already looking at her. Later, inside, the silence between them was thicker than ever. Adrian stood at the window, staring down at the city like he was still calculating what had just happened. Isabel stayed near the kitchen counter, arms crossed, unsure whether to thank him or scream. You didn't have to come, she said finally. I could have handled it. He turned. I know. Then, after a pause, but I wanted to. She didn't answer. Not right away. Because her heart, traitor that it was, had already started to believe him. Chapter 19 A Stay at the Estate. The invitation arrived in the most Adrian way imaginable, a clean, cream-colored envelope hand-delivered by a driver in a pressed suit. Inside, just one piece of thick stationery with his embossed initials in deep slate gray. You need rest. Come to the coast. Just for the weekend. No press. No drama. No pressure. We can talk. That's all. Adrian. There was no date, no RSVP card. Just a number to call and a waiting car downstairs. And somehow, Isabel already knew, if she called the number, the gates would open. She didn't answer immediately. She stood at her kitchen counter for 10 minutes, staring at the card, trying to figure out what part of her still trusted him enough to even consider it. But the truth was, she was exhausted. And the idea of 2 days away from everything, from reporters, from Daniel, from the spiraling chaos of her own apartment, was tempting in a way she hadn't expected. So she called. And the car was waiting. By late afternoon, the city had fallen behind them, and the coast had opened wide and wild. Adrian's estate was perched high on a cliffside in Big Sur, where jagged rocks met endless Pacific waves. It wasn't a house so much as a fortress of glass and stone, tucked into the bluff like it had grown there over time. Sleek lines, wide terraces, quiet opulence. As her car curved up the private drive, Isabel pressed a palm to her belly out of instinct, not showing yet, not really, but aware. The front door opened before the driver even cut the engine. Adrian stood there in jeans and a dark sweater, looking almost, like a normal man. But there was nothing ordinary about the way he looked at her. No formality. No mask. Just watchfulness. Like he wasn't sure what version of her he'd find. Hi, she said quietly as she stepped out. He took her overnight bag from the driver without a word. This isn't a trap, Isabel, he said finally, once they were alone on the terrace. You're not being brought here to be talked into anything. She nodded once. That's good. Because I'm not in the mood to be handled. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but almost. The interior of the house was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean. Clean lines, pale woods, dark steel. Minimal furniture. Soft lighting. It smelled like salt, cedar, and something faintly expensive. He showed her to a guest suite on the second floor. Of course it had its own terrace, its own espresso machine, its own reading nook with built-in bookshelves and a view of the water that looked stolen from a travel magazine. Everything was peaceful. Too peaceful. "Your estate is absurd," she murmured. "I prefer effective." "Effective at what?" "Intimidation." Adrian leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "No. Isolation. It's the only place I can think clearly." She believed him. "Dinner's at 7," he said. "But only if you want it to be. There's no schedule here." And with that, he left. Alone, Isabel didn't unpack. She stood at the window instead, watching the waves roll in slow and massive below the cliffs. The sound of them crashing far beneath the house was rhythmic, strangely soothing. She realized she wasn't checking her phone. For the first time in days, she wasn't fielding texts or seeing her face on tabloid blogs. Adrian had kept his word. No press. No drama. No pressure. Just space. But even in the quiet, her heart stayed restless. Because the truth still hovered between them, unsaid, unresolved, undeniable. That night at dinner, the house shifted slightly. Adrian had changed, black sweater, dark slacks, barefoot. No pretense. No armor. They sat outside, near a fire pit built into the stone. Waves below, stars above. The food was simple: roasted fish, grilled vegetables, lemon over wild rice. All catered by someone invisible. "I can't tell if you're trying to impress me or disarm me," Isabel said halfway through her plate. "Does it have to be one or the other?" he replied. The fire crackled. The sea whispered. And for once, they weren't fighting. They didn't talk about the baby. Not yet. Not directly. But they talked. About the storm in Cancún. About the silence that followed. About the family that neither of them trusted anymore. And for the first time, Isabel caught a glimpse of something beneath the ice Adrian wore like a second skin. Regret. Restraint. Resolve. That night, she lay in the massive guest bed with the window cracked open. She heard the ocean. The occasional creak of the house settling. And her heart beat, louder than ever. She didn't know what the next morning would bring. But for the first time in weeks, she slept. And for the first time since she took that first test, she didn't feel entirely alone. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.